When we talk about Mad Max movies, there are a couple of things that come to mind first. The desert, the bad guys, and a lot of crazy vehicles. With each sequel, the post-apocalyptic world became even crazier, and so did the cars. We will explore the story elements that influence the changes in these vehicles, as well as the real-life challenges. Some of the cars were not even safe to drive. So stick around until the end, as some of the transformations may surprise you. Fury Road boasts probably the craziest-looking cars not only in the Mad Max franchise, but in the entirety of film history. In fact, 150 cars were designed and made for the film, rightfully earning it an Academy Award for Best Production Design.
Mad Max Fury Road, Colin Gibson, production design.
Their appearance can be attributed to a backstory where the world as we know it ceased to exist due to a series of nuclear wars that wiped out civilizations. As a result of these wars, the human population and technology both declined significantly, and the world became a violent place. Vehicles had to undergo adaptations to survive. These adaptations are evident in Fury Road, where vehicles like the 1940 Fargo pickup, Chrysler Valiant Charger, and 1959 Cadillac Coupe de Ville were transformed into monstrous versions of themselves. These monstrous cars were created by welding several cars together. For example, the Gigahorse was made of two 1959 Cadillac Coupe de Ville sitting on top of each other, while the Peacemaker was constructed from parts of a Chrysler Valiant Charger mounted on the tank. This tank was created in the United States, and due to film budget limitations, it had to go through modifications. These modifications resulted in issues such as engine overheating, brake fires, and sand ingestion damaging the engine. The issues were eventually fixed, and we got to see this vehicle in the final cut. Other vehicles, such as the Volkswagen Beetle, 1937 Plymouth sedan, and Australian Parenti, received upgrades in the form of engines, spikes, or other features that just looked cool. Some cars were too risky to use, so they didn't make it to the final cut. Cars like the Cranky Frank and the Ballistic had issues with either being too easy to roll over, poor visibility from the cab, or were very tough to get into. But how did vehicles exactly look before the events of Fury Road? You see, cars in Mad Max movies were not always like that, and it is evident in the first movie where civilization was still standing, although on the brink of collapse. For that reason, we still see civilian and police cars. However, the story of Mad Max 2 is where it all began. It takes place a few years after the events of Mad Max 1, when civilization had already collapsed, and where we can see the first changes in the cars. These changes came from the gangs who left the cities to pursue easy prey in the deserts. To catch them, they used speed cars like the Ford Landau, Ford Falcon, and many others. Even the Chrysler Valiant Charger featured in Fury Road had previously appeared in Mad Max 2, driven by rogue cops. Alongside speed cars, it was the first time we saw buggies being used, as they are specifically suited for that environment. Additionally, custom cars began to emerge. For example, the main antagonist in the movie Lord Humongous can be seen driving one of these custom vehicles, which were likely based on Ford F-Series chassis, like many others in the film. We can also see one of the protagonists driving a similar vehicle, with a Ford 351 engine installed. Custom cars might seem strange to you, but they became the standard in the Mad Max world for a couple of reasons. Firstly, during the apocalypse, most normal cars were destroyed, so custom cars made from scraps slowly became the norm. Secondly, custom cars make it easier to attack enemy vehicles. In Mad Max 3, this standard in cars is even more evident, as all the vehicles in the film are either buggies or other custom cars. You see, George Miller and his crew understood that if they wanted to move on with the post-apocalyptic story of Mad Max, they needed to adapt the cars to the changes in the environment. Unlike cars in Mad Max 2, these custom cars seem to be more armored, which is not surprising considering the events happened 15 years later. In that period, gangs learned a lot about what works best for their vehicles, as indicated in the Mad Max comics, where there were numerous clashes between them. To build these cars, scraps from vehicles like Toyota Land Cruisers and Ford F-Series were used. Even Max's car in this movie is a custom one, likely built on a Ford F-150 chassis, customized with the cab of a Ford Falcon XA sedan. Tina Turner, portraying the main antagonist, can also be seen driving a custom vehicle. But sometime between the apocalypses of Mad Max 1 and 2, young Immortan Joe enlisted a mechanic named Donk to construct the most powerful vehicles the world has ever seen. He began with a war rig, as seen in the movie, by welding the body of his old Chevrolet Fleetmaster onto the chassis of an army vehicle, the Tatra T-815, which Immortan Joe had seized from a deserted soldier. He then installed twin engines and connected it all to a tanker, both of which were also captured by Immortan's gang. In the story, the mechanic Donk was likely also responsible for building other vehicles mentioned earlier, such as the Gigahorse or the Peacemaker. However, in reality, George Miller's crew began assembling some of these vehicles back in 2003, as Fury Road was originally intended to be filmed then. Due to various reasons, the movie wasn't completed until 2015, and of the 150 vehicles constructed, only 88 survived to the end of filming. This fact highlights the tremendous effort that director George Miller invested in producing the film. Believe me, it would take additional video to explain the work he put into those vehicles over the years. Instead, I'd like to conclude by thanking you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, as this supports the creation of more unique Mad Max content.